Frank has patched the same stretch of overpass 3 times in the last 4 years. He's a concrete contractor, 30 years into the job, and he knows exactly what's going to happen the moment he finishes each repair. Give it a few winters, it'll crack again, right along the same seam. That's just what concrete does. He stopped being surprised by it a long time ago. What Frank doesn't know, standing there with his trowel, is that 2,000 years ago on the other side of the world, someone solved this exact problem. And solved it so well that the building they made is still standing today, completely unrepaired, in the middle of a modern city. It's called the Pantheon. It has the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth, and it has never needed a single patch job. Not one in 2,000 years. By the end of this video, you'll understand something engineers only figured out in 2023. A secret that had been sitting in plain sight, in plain concrete, the entire time. If you're new here, subscribe to Ancestral Fix. Every week, we find what the ancient world knew and what we're only now beginning to understand again. Stay with me. Here's what makes Frank's job so frustrating, if he ever stopped to think about it. Modern concrete typically starts showing serious cracking within 50 years. Cities pour staggering amounts of money into repairing and replacing it every single year, forever, because once it cracks, it just stays cracked. Frank's entire career is built on that fact. The Pantheon was finished in 125 AD. It has survived earthquakes, floods, fires, and 2,000 years of Roman summers and winters, and it required essentially none of what Frank does for a living. So what did they know that we don't? For a long time, we actually knew the basic recipe. Volcanic ash, seawater, lime, nothing secret, nothing exotic. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote the whole process down in the 1st century BC, explaining exactly which volcanic ash to use. Frank has never heard of Vitruvius, and there's no reason he should have. But if you handed him that 2,000-year-old recipe today, he'd recognize half the ingredients from his own truck. Historians had this information for centuries. What nobody could explain was the strange part. Why the material got stronger with age instead of weaker, and why Roman harbors, sitting in constant seawater, held up even better than buildings on dry land. Seawater destroys modern concrete. It should have destroyed Roman concrete even faster. It didn't. The Pantheon wasn't a fluke either. Roman harbors up and down the Mediterranean were built the same way, and so were aqueducts that still carry water in a few places today, and stretches of Roman road still forming the base of modern highways across Europe, buried under asphalt that Frank's crews will need to repave again within the decade. The Roman layer underneath just sits there, doing its job. Whatever the Romans figured out, they weren't guarding it as some rare trick for one special building. It was ordinary practice, repeated across an empire that stretched from Britain to North Africa by workers who probably thought about their jobs, the same practical way Frank thinks about his. That contradiction sat there, unsolved, for a very long time. Then, in 2023, a team of researchers at MIT picked up a sample of ancient Roman concrete and looked closely at something almost everyone had overlooked. Scattered through the material were tiny white flecks. For decades, these had been written off as a mistake. Sloppy mixing, ancient workers who had not blended their materials properly. Turns out that assumption was exactly backwards. Those white flecks, called lime clasts, were not a mistake at all. They were doing a job nobody had noticed. When a crack forms and water gets in, the lime clasts react with that water, dissolve, and recrystallize, filling the crack back in almost like a wound closing on its own. The concrete had been quietly repairing itself this entire time, for 2,000 years. While historians walked past it, assuming the little white spots were just poor workmanship. It's a strange thing to sit with. Somewhere out there, some Roman worker, doing more or less what Frank does for a living, was mixing lime into a batch of concrete in a way that would still be healing itself 2,000 years later. He almost certainly had no idea what he was actually building into that mixture at a chemical level. He just knew the method his father used, and his father before him, and it worked. Think about Frank for a second. Kneeling over that same crack for the third time. He's not doing anything wrong. He's using the material the way it was built to be used. It just wasn't built to heal. The MIT team didn't stop at a theory. They mixed a batch of concrete using the old Roman method, cracked it deliberately, and ran water through it. Within weeks, the crack had closed itself. They cracked a batch of modern concrete the same way, right next to it. It just stayed broken, the way Frank's overpass always does. That side-by-side result is what turned an old mystery into a real, tested discovery. Not a guess, not folklore, a controlled comparison, and the 2,000-year-old formula won. Here's the part that stings a little. If you're someone like Frank, knowing the secret hasn't made it easy to fix. The specific volcanic ash the Romans used only comes from one region of Italy, with a mineral makeup that's genuinely hard to replicate with what's available today. Researchers are working on modern versions inspired by the discovery, and a few early self-healing concretes are already being tested. But building it at the scale modern countries need, cheaply and quickly, has proven far harder than anyone expected. It's worth asking why we didn't just go back to the old way the moment the mystery was solved. Part of the answer is speed. Rome wasn't paving 1,000 miles of highway a year. They built slower, with materials sourced from specific volcanic deposits nearby, meant to outlast the people who poured it. Modern construction runs on speed and cheap, standardized materials that can be trucked in from anywhere. The old formula wasn't forgotten because it failed. It was set aside because it didn't fit a world in a hurry, the same world that keeps Frank employed, patching the same cracks year after year. Some engineers are trying to change that slowly. A handful of pilot projects around the world are now testing concrete mixed with the same basic principle the Romans stumbled onto, hoping to build roads and structures that shrug off small cracks the way the Pantheon has for 2 millennia. It's early, it's expensive right now, and it's nowhere near ready to replace what Frank pours every day. But it's the first real sign that the old formula might eventually come back, not as a museum curiosity, but as something people actually build with. Again, there's something almost humbling in that. We can pour concrete by the mile, seal it with machines Frank's grandfather never dreamed of, and finish a highway in weeks instead of years. And in 2023, all of that still hadn't caught up to a formula a Roman engineer wrote on a scroll 2,000 years earlier. And even now, knowing exactly how it works, we still can't fully build it the way he did. It raises a question worth sitting with. How much of what the ancient world understood got dismissed the same way those little white flecks were, written off as a flaw, an accident, something careless, when it was actually the entire point? Let's go back to Frank one more time. Imagine if the crew that built that overpass had used a formula that healed itself the way Roman concrete does. Imagine Frank spending those hours somewhere else with his own family instead of kneeling over the same seam for the third time in 4 years. That's not nostalgia for the ancient world. That's just what happens when something is built to last instead of built to be replaced. That's really the theme running through everything we cover on this channel. It's not that the ancient world had some kind of magic. It's that they often built things with patience for people they'd never meet, in ways our faster, cheaper modern approach quietly stopped bothering with. Let's come back to where we started. Frank, patching a crack that will open again by next winter, and across an ocean, a 2,000-year-old dome, still whole, still standing. made from a formula we're only now starting to understand well enough to respect. If there's one thing to take from today, let it be this. Sometimes ancient doesn't mean primitive. Sometimes it just means we haven't caught up yet. If this kind of ancestral wisdom speaks to you, consider subscribing, because next time we are looking at a weapon the Byzantine Empire used for 800 years, so effective and so secret that when the empire fell, the formula disappeared with it. We would love to have you along.